Welcome to round two, from setback to comeback. I'm Jaclyn, founder of StarCycle. We help founders shut down their companies faster. And we make the difficult parts of wind up a little bit easier so that you can get back to doing what you love faster. As a third-time founder, I know firsthand the entrepreneurial journey is anything but smooth. There are highs that inspire us, but the lows that challenge us are really what stick with us for longer. And round two is all about pivotal moments with founders, innovators, and visionaries who faced these setbacks head on and found their way to a stronger, smarter comeback. And today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Rockman Ha, former founder of Byte, Peach, and Clear Talent, and now works closely with portfolio companies at the General Partnership. Rockman has shut down and sold his companies, run the gamut from operator to founder and now VC, learning a ton of lessons along the way. Personally, I'm also privileged to call Rockman as one of my investors and friend outside of this. And I'm always awestruck by his kindness and wisdom, and it is a gift to have him on our episode today. It's going to be a good one, I can tell. So grab your coffee, put on your hoodie, get cozy, and join me for another inspiring story about reinvention. Welcome, Rockman.
Thanks so much. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, so to kick things off, I guess we can start with your story. I know you very well, but want to introduce you for the rest of the audience. So who is Rockman as a founder? Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. As a New York native, I've started working since I was 16 in a variety of different roles. Service-based work has always been of interest to me. In addition to that, bringing my friends in to work with me at restaurants, in corporations, etc. So recruiting was just a natural calling. From there, I always had a couple of questions as to why very specific things weren't being done in the recruiting space, but just more generally from a founding standpoint. You'll find me in a really weird way if you're sitting with me in a restaurant, as we've sat before, looking at logistics, trying to wonder, like, what can we do differently? What can we do better? And I think that's what really led me to starting my first company with a buddy of mine. He was the former founder of Vine, and we worked together at JetSetter and at Guild Group, and post his acquisition, we got together and started building Byte and Peach. It was a really great experience, and after that, I joined the company Transfix. Post that, again, I think the startup bug hit me, and I decided to start Clear Talent, which was subsequently acquired by Patreon. So I think that is really just in a nutshell about myself.
Great. I mean, I think we can all relate to the idea of the startup bug hitting again. And honestly, even personally, right, as a second, third time founder, you almost have a compulsion to go back to founding because there are just so many problems left unsolved and so many curiosities and so many passions you want to explore that there almost is no other way. And I know you had an interesting start to your career where you started out in a very corporate environment. You started at Facebook, now Meta. You started at MongoDB, also on the recruiting side of things. And just to take a moment there, because I think for a lot of folks who are thinking about making a transition from corporate into founding, there's a very different relationship with success and failure that a KPI-driven environment may feel very different from, some place where you are kind of, there's the only sword you can fall on is yourself. And so how did you navigate that transition, and what were some of the lessons you learned from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a risk tolerance standpoint, mine has always been incredibly high. And I've always been a believer, and even in whether in sales or otherwise, I've always been taught, like, if you can't believe in yourself, like, who can you actually believe in, right? So I think a lot of the ownership and impact was something that I was clearly craving. I just didn't know it as of yet. I think early on in founding, I think I didn't have enough advisors. I didn't have enough mentors in my career. At least not in the spaces that I should have, right? Really understanding how to best scale, how to best build, how to make the right decisions, I think has always been fairly challenging. I mean, even to this day, I still have a number of mentors that I am very, very grateful for, and being able to, bounce certain ideas off of, and continue to have that wisdom. I think that's really just some of the things I tend to think about when having started. the, it wasn't very difficult to acclimate to starting something new though, just because again risk tolerance was fairly high, and I think of most people, I care about impact and value creation quite a bit higher than most. I don't let things fall more generally. So if I need to work all night in order to do so, I'm going to do it. The wife doesn't love it, but that's just generally how I'm wired.
So it's so interesting you bring up the risk tolerance thing, and side note for anyone who's wondering, work-life balance is tough. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but it is tough, and I think any founder can attest to that. But coming back to your relationship with risk, and I think most founders are very risk tolerant, and at the same time, that do you feel like your relationship with risk and being able to stomach a lot of perhaps difficulties that most other people might stumble or perhaps throw in the towel on, how do you feel like that has influenced your relationship with failure? And of course, how has that influenced your decision to found multiple companies?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely have a higher threshold for pain
Mm,
than
mm,
most humans do.
mm,
I'm called robotic in many
mm,
situations. I just
mm,
don't let a lot of these things get to me. Look, at
mm,
the end of the day, I mean, it's a business. We understand the inputs and outputs. Oftentimes, they're inputs and outputs, right? Um,
mhm, mhm,
is it an input that I couldn't control? If it is, then
mm,
maybe I'll think about it some way. But there are things that are in my control. I'll worry
mhm,
about those. There are things that are
mhm,
outside of my control. There's no sense in worrying about that, right?
mm.
So I just let that roll off my skin. Now, to answer your second question, how has that changed my interest or my ability to found startups? I think you learn so much in such a short amount of time, and I think
Mhm,
you learn best while failing. That's my
mhm,
personal opinion, right? I think you learn about the things that you shouldn't do, the things that it's learned lessons. I don't think it's necessarily failure. It's just learned lessons and how you can take that and apply that going forward to different situations, different contexts, different problems.
mhm.
So I think it's just helped me a ton in my
Yeah.
career and my growth.
Yeah, I love that almost very zen, like stoic kind of approach to failure, because it is unfortunately or fortunately inevitable, and really the part you can control is how you react to it, right? And would love to hear more about that part of their journey, especially through the lens of, we can start with Bite and Peach, both consumer companies. And Peach, I myself was actually a user way back in the day. It definitely made quite a blip on the social consumer landscape, and with a lot of that success came a unfortunate end that, of course, nobody sets out starting a company to close it down. And so we'd love to hear you talk about a little bit more about the rise and the eventual fall, and your kind of journey through that, your relationship with yourself, with the company, and perhaps with the team that you built, given that your role as a very operationally facing, like team facing kind of role.
The Peach was such a fun time because I think it was so new, and it was so interesting for a number of folks. We were doing this beta test. I think everyone absolutely loved it. I, as a non-social media person, I was using it all the time. It was really fascinating to watch a number of my friends, and just to remind folks of what Peach was. I think when you think about Facebook, when you think about Instagram, oftentimes it's very curated. You have this large number of friend group, but the reality is you probably only cared about 5 or 10 of them, right? Maybe 20 if you're fairly social. Um, and this is also before a lot of the algorithms were out there. So for me, if I wanted to post on Facebook, I'd be concerned how many times I was posting on Facebook, how frequently, and what my friend groups would be viewing, right? I think on Peach, it was just really meant for your most intimate friend groups. Being able to spam it if you wanted. If I wanted to, I had a dog. If I wanted to spam photos of my dog all the time, it was something that my friend group would understand and actually enjoy because they're a part of my inner circle, so to speak. Um, so going back into the rise, no one say fall necessarily. I think subsequently the company was acquired, but it was interesting to watch the company change dramatically. We did a soft launch, and I think over that weekend, I mean, all of our servers went down. So the engineering team was working around the clock because we got to 500K unique signups over the weekend. And I think, mind you, this was quite some time ago. I think today's world is very different than back then. So 500K signups was massive, right? A fun story was I had to, given my name is fairly unique, I had to handle as at Rockman. Someone reached out to me on Peach and asked me if I would be willing to sell my handle for upwards of $5,000, which I clearly
Wow.
declined. Right. Um,
You did.
so
Oh.
I, I no, I declined. I did not sell. I, I
Oh,
I can't imagine selling my own handle
that would
for my own
be
company.
that would be hilarious though if you did. Do it for the bit.
Right.
But
Exactly.
understood that you didn't. Understandable decision.
Right. So, I think that went that went viral pretty quickly. I recall
Mhm.
us being on the news, like what is Peach, and just a number of folks reaching out to us. I think that was phenomenal.
Mhm.
It was
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
exciting. But over time, I think with the initial intent of it being really for your inner circle, I think people are using it for a very different version, almost a la Tumblr, just a ton of posts, not caring about it. And I think, over time, like most social media companies do, um, our user base spiked really quickly and then subsequently dropped relatively quickly. Now, I think over time it was starting to pick up again, but it wasn't an endeavor that we found to be worth the continue to be worth the effort. So we ended up moving on from that. And I myself ended up moving on from the organization as well, is because I think we'd raised a Series A, things were going really well. The team was never. We always kept it a fairly lean team with phenomenal engineers. Um, we had to do a layoff just because we weren't finding the impact that we wanted. So in addition to that, I decided to move on, largely because I don't think that I was adding as much. I might have mentioned before, I care deeply about impact and value creation. So along with the engineers, I volunteered because I didn't. I would have rather kept another engineer on staff and just continue to build product than to be there. I advised subsequently up until the acquisition, of course. But regardless, that was the idea. Um,
That's,
I
I
think,
mean, that's a tough decision for any founder to make, is to walk away from something that you poured your whole life and soul into. And especially when, for a lot of folks, it's almost like chasing that first initial wave of success. You call it a high, you call it, the first hit you make on the world. It's hard to walk away from that. And, of course, you guys, as in Peach, ended up finding a safe home and finding an exit, and also an exit that a lot of founders would dream of. But for you, it must have been a tough decision. So yeah, would love to hear more around how you took that with you and brought it into your next roles, and then eventually Clear Talent, where you also landed a great acquisition, this time to Patreon.
yeah. I mean, I think it was a challenging time. I think
Mm,
having to make that decision, to your point, of wanting to be around, wanting to. I still had deep belief in what we were building, as well as the team that we've
mm,
built. Right. Um, we spent a lot of energy and time in finding just the right subset of humans.
mm,
And I think the vast majority of them are still at Discord, which is really,
mm.
really exciting. So shout
That's
out to the
great.
team there.
Yeah.
But I think it just gives you a very different perspective from an ownership standpoint, as well as from a business operator, right? I think for a lot of employees, they tend to believe it's a fairly narrow view insofar as what the business entails, right? It is very much so. I need to worry about this block of code. I need to worry about this product. I need to worry about selling. Being a founder allows you to piece them all together, and so I think that's why it was a really unique role when I joined Transfix, which was a trucking startup. I think I joined at the seed stage. I believe I joined at the seed stage when we were about 20 people. I joined as the head of people and talent, and over some period of time, I ended up taking over operations as well, which entailed customer success, account management, operation coordination, etc. So really just back office operations. Um, the reason why I think I was able to do that was because of the founder journey and failing at that, right? Really being able to piece all these things together and understand how the business itself works was incredibly important. And I think it was just a lesson that I was able to take forward into Transfix. I had a phenomenal board member at Transfix, former McKinsey guy. And he taught me just, Paul Shao taught me so much as well, insofar as just how to think about analytics, how to think about data, etc. So from there, having left Transfix, I started Clear Talent, which was, to your point, subsequently acquired by Patreon. I think Clear Talent was a an embedded recruiting company, but I think talking about McKinsey, one of the ideals that I had was when you think about fundraising, you think about growth, you think about all of these different things, right? You tend to, when you're a larger stage, when you're a later stage company, if you have challenges with your business, you call McKinsey, you call Bain, you call one of these large consulting companies. When you had challenges in recruiting, you didn't really have anyone to call. You didn't really have anyone to talk to that understand your business really intimately and someone that you could trust to really deliver meaningful value. So that's why I ended up building Clear Talent. That was really always the vision. Um, I think being able to piece together the first time founder, in addition to running all of operations, and then from there, it just gave me a lot more context on how to best build a scalable, profitable business. And that was bootstrapped as well. So just tons of learnings.
Yeah, and I can imagine because for a lot of folks, for a lot of founders, talent can be a huge bottleneck for so many reasons. You know, like everyone wants to find the best talent. It's hard to find them. It's hard to, build the right set of systems, especially if you're just starting out. Like how to incentivize people, how to make them feel valued, how to make them feel like their work is impactful. All of these things, all the way to we've all heard the conventional wisdom, if you will, of you know hire slow, fire fast, because a someone who's not the right fit, even though it's a right fit, is also can be subjective. Sometimes it's not necessarily the person's fault, but not having the right fit could be detrimental and could contribute, if not lead to directly, like the failure of your company. So it's really interesting that you took all of those learnings with you and built something out of it, and of course had a great exit. So it's really awesome that you were able to take all of these learnings, especially given that talent is such a crucial part of every founder's journey, finding the right talent to join them, um, and incentivizing them to stay for beyond monetary reasons, right? Like these are all very tough questions that every founder has to wrangle with. And it's really great that you spent so much time and brought all of these learnings with you to build really impactful tools to help founders and companies run better. And so now you're in a pretty different side of the table, right? Like on the more investor side of things, you're working with portfolio companies, you're working with founders that are in the position that you were once in. And how has your journey, how have your failures kind of informed the way that you help these founders, and what types of advice are you giving them?
Yeah, I think working really closely with our portfolio companies as well as doing a lot of founder dating, I call it,
Hmm.
for future investments and just
Hmm.
introducing them to the firm has been just a ton of fun.
Hmm.
Um, I think the advice that I tend to give them is I don't know that every business is a venture scale business. Um, it's really thinking through what is the business model, what is the business metrics, what are you hoping to achieve out of this? I think that is one piece. I think the second piece is how passionate are you about this business? Are you looking for are you looking for an out? Are you looking to start a business for the sake of starting a business? How much do you really want to dedicate? And I think this should resonate with you as well. And when you're building something, it's kind of like marriage. You're probably gonna expect to do this for 10, 15 years if all goes well. And naturally that's the goal. Um, are you ready to make that commitment, right? And are you ready to deal with the ups and downs? The highs are so incredibly high. The lows, as we talk about, are so incredibly low. Now, on the other side, you just learn so much. You will learn more and faster than you've ever learned before. Um, whether it's fundraising, whether it's hiring, whether it's sales, engineering, product, and all the different things that come alongside. Um, I think my role is oftentimes very operational. I am working with teams and understanding the talent, understanding what they're trying to build. But I think it oftentimes bleeds beyond that. I think both in the general partnership, while I'm still fairly new here, at Clear Talent, I was working with a number of folks thinking about board conversations, board decks, almost they're in some ways interpersonal therapists about what's broken in the world, right? Just because I think people are people are at the core and at the center of everything that you're dealing with as you're starting a company and as you're founding a company. So we just built really strong relationships. So I think those are the pieces that we tend to talk about. So it could vary everywhere from go to market, product hiring, etc. So I think that those are different pieces that I talked to them about.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So
Wow. Yeah. That's so cool that you're able to effectively take your time that and your experiences as a founder and almost distribute them right to the folks that you're working with. That's really really awesome. And one of the things, of course, that you touched on was the highs and lows of being a founder. And as we all know, as we both know, the highs, as you said, are incredibly high, and the lows just make you retreat from the world and shut everyone off. And as an investor, I feel like your vantage point probably has changed. And for a lot of founders out there who are struggling with like putting these lows into words, putting these lows into their investor updates because they're scared that their investors are going to judge them, that they need to paint the rosiest picture they can possibly paint, because otherwise it might jeopardize the next round or anything like that. What I don't know if this is something that you had to go through previously, and perhaps you have your own personal take on it, but now sitting on this side of the table, what do you have to say to those founders who might be struggling to articulate some of the challenges and the failures that they're facing to someone like you?
many founders and the folks that I've known, oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
I think fall prey to that, right? Like our board deck needs to be amazing, our
Mm.
insights need to be amazing, everything needs to be just top notch, and everything needs to be on the up and up. I think as I've gone through this in my journey, I think your investors, oftentimes assuming you picked well, and your board are there to help you. That's really the goal. Um, the entire intent behind having them should be to help them strategize, to really understand what is broken, not to keep them at arm's length, right? I think if you're doing that, they'll say, "This is great. You don't need my help. Continue on." I think that's oftentimes the intent of the founders who do so. But I think really sharing what you're concerned about and really sharing what the challenges are shouldn't be the thing that gives your investors pause. If anything, it shows the humility, and it shows that you have a growth mindset of, hey, I'm in a position here that I need some additional help, and so therefore I'm reaching out for said help. Right? I think the challenge is there's nothing worse than having the curtains pulled last minute, and it's like, oh wow, there's a lot more broken here than I had ever anticipated. And I think that's what creates challenges. That's also what creates failed number of failed startups, right? So I think being as forthright as possible. Now I think there's very very nuanced things that may be more difficult to share in this, but I think just having a really strong relationship with your board as well as your investors is oftentimes more helpful than not.
Yeah, and it's super counterintuitive because again, I would say it's probably human nature to want to show the highlight reel rather than, bear it all. And that's what separates founders, good founders from not so great founders, I would say. And speaking of counterintuitiveness, one thing that you've always told me in our conversations outside of this episode is that a lot of startup challenges really boil down to people and relationships that you build. And, along your time as an operator, as a founder, and now investor or investor adjacent, what is a counterintuitive insight that about human behavior, perhaps, that founders tend to overlook?
I don't think that is counterintuitive, but I think I as I've gotten deeper in the space of hiring and just watching some of the growth of humans, I think it boils down to just I prefer general athletes in hiring. I don't love hiring domain experts as much as I did in the past. I think it's incredibly helpful, but I think it comes with other baggage. I think the my general MO nowadays when I think about hiring, oftentimes is just hire folks that have high sense of ownership, are growth minded, and just high level of intentionality, right? Or intuitively just have that natural ambition, right, to be a future founder, to want to do these things. The sense of ownership is just by far and wide higher, and I think they'll care just much more deeply about things. That may not sound counterintuitive, but I think there's so many folks that are saying, "I want the most senior people. I want this person to have done X, Y, Z." I think in certain cases that may be necessary, but I think I would argue in 80% of it, it's probably not as important as we may think it is.
And the ownership part, to bring it back to what you were saying earlier, it's owning the things that go well, of course, and taking ownership of things that aren't being done, but also things that aren't going well and taking ownership of that. And I think that is you find someone like that definitely is a diamond in the rough, because it's so much easier to, turn your back on things that didn't go well and only shine the spotlight on things that did go well. And, founders, this is perhaps an easier pill to swallow, but I think finding the right folks to join your team who also embody that is a big part of it. And this is something I'm sure you've seen time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, I think owning the outcomes is of the utmost importance, right? Right?
Yeah,
Like, I think
absolutely.
good, bad, ugly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is probably one of the hardest things that I know personally I had to learn as a founder, of course, as a team member before I became a founder. And, on a personal note, I'm just really happy that I get to learn from someone like you. And thank you for taking the time today to share this with everyone who's listening, with the world, because I could not possibly keep these nuggets of wisdom to myself. So thank you, Rockman, for sharing with this with everyone. And for anyone who's listening, for anyone who's going through a tough decision right now, or whether it's something like, I don't know if I'm ready to be a founder yet, or it's like I am a founder and I'm staring at a crossroads and I'm not quite sure what to do. What was something that helped you when you had those challenges, and what was something that you kind of kept coming back to?
I tend to believe in my decision matrix is
Mm.
what am I gonna regret less?
Mm.
I don't regret many things in life,
Mm-hmm.
because I've already made a decision and I put it to bed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at a decision, like when I'm already old. When I'm older, what am I gonna regret less? Am I gonna regret this, or am I gonna regret this? I I don't know that I've been in a situation where starting my own thing or starting
Mm.
it with a friend was something that I
Mm-hmm.
was gonna regret. No
Mm.
matter what it was going to look like, that was going to be the idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
I took a shot, I took a stab at it. I put my all into it. Win, lose or draw, I felt I was proud about the outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's funny because I out of on Reddit, out of all places, I remember reading a comment that echoes very much the sentiment you just shared. And it was along the lines of something like, the years are going to pass anyway, so why not? And that a throwaway comment buried in, like, I'm sure it was an Ask Reddit thread, genuinely just changed my brain chemistry, changed the way how I looked at life. And, to hear you say that, out of all the years I spent on that freaking platform, I'm glad this was something that stuck with me. And to hear you say that, definitely, at least for myself, was very validating. So, yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would love to learn from you, and, what and how, if I were to point them your way, like, where would they be able to find you?
LinkedIn is probably the place I am most frequent on.
Mm-hmm. And if someone were to, want to work with you at the GP, or on the individual level, like, what is something that you'd be looking for in a founder, outside of the sense of ownership thing?
I think it is to drive. I think they have to have this insane drive to be successful. Not for the sake of monetary. It's a belief in the vision, belief in the product, belief in what they're building, right, and why it's impactful to the world. I think is very much the thing that we look for, and the thing that I look for, right? The thing I want to avoid, or the folks that are looking to build a business because it's cool to be a founder sometimes. I think those just don't work out in the long run. Maybe they do, edge cases, of course, right? But for the most part, I just it's not the thing that works out best.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And to bring it all the way back home, founders have to not be afraid to fail. And I think that really just sums up your journey as a founder, Rockman. Just keep getting back up, regardless of where life takes you. Of course, you have more exits under your belt than I personally could ever dream of. And one day I'll catch up to you. But in the meantime, I am just going to learn from you, and hopefully everyone else who is listening does as well. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story. And I'm honestly just really excited for the opportunity I get to learn alongside you, and grow with you, and growing old is a privilege. That's what I tell myself, and then I look in the mirror and I see your white hair and I'm like, damn it. But until then, we live and we learn, and you can't do that in a vacuum. They're not mutually exclusive. So until then, to more learnings, to more failures, and thank you again, Rockman, and we'll see you next time.
Pleasure to meet you. Thanks so much.